In this lecture, we're going to discuss extrinsic rewards, and in particular, we're going to discuss job redesign theory. Why do we work? Obviously, we work for money, that we have to make our house payments, make car payments, buy things that we want, but there are other reasons that we work. Think about what it was you wanted to be when you were a child. What did you want to grow up to be? I'd recommend you watch this YouTube video, which is one of the original Monster.com videos when they explore this. Of course, they explore it from a cynical perspective in terms of how it often turns out for many people who end up in jobs that they don't like. So think about, what is it that brings you to work every day? Again, were you concerned simply with extrinsic rewards, or was there some internal drive, some satisfaction that you received from doing a good job in a particular profession or occupation or organization? And those are intrinsic rewards. They're not things that someone provides to you. They are things that you basically provide yourself, or that you feel or believe. Extrinsic rewards we've discussed at length in our previous cognitive theories, where we've talked about assignments, pay, promotions, things like that. But in this theory, we're going to talk about the intrinsic value that you receive from the way your job is designed. And how your job is designed will influence how motivated you are to perform in that job. This may look a little confusing or overwhelming when you first look at this diagram, but we'll break down each one of these components, and we'll start by working basically from the right side of the chart to the left side. We're going to look at the personal and work outcomes. What is it that an individual achieves or gets out of a job, and then what is it that the organization receives? Those things we know are influenced by critical psychological states that the individual achieves or comes about because of the way the job is designed, which is influenced by growth needs strength. And we're going to then examine how core job dimensions, in other words, specific factors in terms of how a job is designed, influence critical psychological states. And then finally, we're going to discuss implementing concepts, the things that a leader can do to increase core job dimensions, which will produce high levels of critical psychological satisfaction from the job, which will produce the personal and work outcomes that are desired by both the organization and the person. Those personal and work outcomes are relatively simple. Internal work motivation. We want individuals, and individuals want to be highly motivated by their jobs. We want quality work performance, high quality work output. Individuals receive greater personal satisfaction from high quality work performance, and obviously the organization benefits as well. Satisfaction with the work. We all want to feel satisfied from what we do in the workplace. Obviously, the more satisfied we are, the better the work will perform, and the greater the organization will benefit from that work. And then finally, we want low absenteeism and turnover. Individuals don't want to have to change jobs frequently. Individuals shouldn't want to stay home sick or stay away from the job place. So that obviously it benefits the individual, and it also benefits the organization. Not having to pay for absenteeism, pay for overtime associated with people calling in sick, or not having to carry all the cost associated with turnover and what it takes to replace individuals who leave the organization. So those are the four personal and work outcomes. As you can see, all of those outcomes benefit both the individual and the organization, which of course is what we want as leaders, to bring those two factors together: personal needs, wants, desires, and the organization's needs, wants, and desires. Critical psychological states of experience meaningfulness of work experience responsibility for outcomes of work, and knowledge of the actual results of work. If those three items or those three states are high, then we'll have high levels of personal and work outcomes. Now, experience meaningfulness relates to our sense of worth of the effort, the extent to which we believe that our work effort is worthwhile, how important we perceive the work to be. So these two factors influence the extent to which we believe that our work is meaningful. We want responsibility for outcomes. And in this, the individual looks at the extent to which they're responsible for the final work product. The more or the greater the level of responsibility for the final work product, the greater overall responsibility we'll feel for outcomes. And how much influence does the person have over the quality of the work product? So the more influence you have, then obviously the greater sense of responsibility you'll have for that outcome. Knowledge of the results. Think if you never knew the results of your work, how motivated do you think you would be if you never knew what the results of that effort were? Now, all of those three psychological states are influenced by a growth need strength. In other words, it's the extent to which a person who has high levels of growth need strength seeks out additional responsibility and challenge. Low growth need strength is a person who wants security and comfort, and those items are more important. So the growth need strength influences the extent to which the person wants those three critical psychological states: experience meaningfulness, responsibility for outcomes, and knowledge of the results. This is again obviously a continuum. At one end being low, people who want more security and comfort, they want stability, they want every day of their life to be the same. Then there are people with high growth need strength who want additional responsibility and challenge. After they've overcome one challenge, they seek out another challenge. These people need higher levels of growth need strength. Now, there are core job dimensions that are dimensions of the job itself, the way it's designed, that influence the extent to which we perceive these critical psychological states. One is skill variety, the other is task identity, task significance, autonomy, feedback, and we'll discuss each of those in more detail. Skill variety is the extent to which a job requires different skills. Again, this will depend upon the person's growth need strength and their obvious physical or cognitive abilities as well. But some jobs can require too many skills, some jobs not enough. So a person with high growth need strength is going to want a lot of variety. A person with low growth need strength is not going to want much variety. And again, does the person possess the skills needed? So if there's a significant mismatch, they'll be demotivated as well. Task identity. It's the degree to which the job can be seen as a meaningful chunk of work. Now that may seem kind of vague, but different jobs have different logical points at which the overall work can be broken into logical chunks. And the more of those chunks of work, or the more of those pieces of work that can be put together in a sensible way, the greater the individual will be motivated. Again, is the job identifiable, doable chunk of work with a clearly defined and tangible outcome? This is one of the reasons why there's a greater emphasis on allowing patrol officers to do lengthier preliminary and follow-up investigations in the field, because it increases task identity rather than breaking a job that can be done immediately, perhaps with a short-term follow-up investigation, maybe within the same zone that the officer works, rather than passing that work on to a detective. So that's probably the best example I can think of in terms of task identity in policing. Task significance. we all want to believe that the job we do is important for the organization as a whole and for whatever greater meaning we attach to the significance of that organization in our communities or state or nation or whatever the case may be. And again, the extent to which we think the job is important influences how motivated we're going to be. Autonomy. The extent to which we're free to establish processes, schedules, goals, etc., in terms of how we work in the field. And does we think about, does the person have latitude, freedom, or control in deciding how the job will be done? We've talked about assembly line work. The extent to which you're doing the same thing day in, day out, sometimes year in, year out, decade in, decade out, that you're putting left tires on F-150 pickup trucks with no latitude or freedom at all in deciding what you do, how you do it, when you do it. Whereas a lot of jobs allow a lot of latitude and freedom, where individuals can decide when they do the work they want to do, how they do it, and that is, of course, far more motivating. Feedback. The degree to which the job provides feedback on performance. Now, obviously, feedback can be provided by individuals, and in jobs with customer contact, some of the feedback is provided by customers. A waitress receives feedback in the form of a tip. That's immediate feedback about the quality of service. Of course, it's not consistent because a wide variety of people provide that feedback. We receive feedback from our superiors, and again, I'll assert that the FAST principle, frequent, accurate, specific, and timely, is the best form of feedback that we can give to individuals. Sometimes the job itself provides feedback about the quality of our work. And again, the purpose of this is so that the individual can tell how they're doing. Again, without formal feedback, without having to wait a period of time for that annual performance appraisal, and preferably even for superiors and peers. So that to the extent that we can design jobs so that the job itself gives them some feedback about how well they're doing, the more motivating it's going to be. Now we can look at the implementing concepts, which are the concepts or leader actions or design actions that we can take to produce these core job dimensions. We can combine tasks. We can form natural work units, establish client relationships. We can do what's called vertical loading, or we can open feedback channels. Combining task is just what it states. By adding additional tasks, we obviously increase skill variety and or task identity. So if we're trying to produce a greater task identity, we can add several different tasks together to create a more meaningful chunk of work. And obviously we increase skill variety as well. And again, those have to make sense. We can't just cobble together a bunch of tasks that aren't necessarily related in an attempt to make the job more motivating. It would probably make it less motivating. And again, it should be related to achieving the person's and the organization's goals and responsibilities. We can form natural work units, dividing or combining the workload at natural break points. Because most of us, even though we would like to have greater task identity, we recognize where there are logical break points in a work process where it makes sense to pass the task perhaps from one individual to the next, one team to the next, or whatever the case may be. And again, that's the purpose of which is to create meaningful chunks of work, because then we can feel greater responsibility for it. And it contributes to task identity and task significance. Obviously, the natural work units creates task identity, and if it's a more meaningful chunk of work, then obviously we're going to view it as being more significant. We can establish client relationships. By putting a person in direct contact with whoever it is that the person serves, either provides a good to or provides a service. Building a personal relationship is obviously an additional task, so it increases skill variety. It also puts us in a position where we can receive feedback, and it helps us develop a greater sense of responsibility for the work and quality and pride in the outcome. And again, that contributes to skill variety because obviously it's one more task. It contributes to autonomy because having direct relationship with the person who receives the good or service allows us to customize that, and it provides, again, feedback from the customer. Vertical loading, it's just a fancy way of saying giving someone greater decision-making authority. It's called vertical loading because essentially the superior passes authority to the subordinate, allowing them greater flexibility in how they do their job. Again, it contributes to autonomy, and we all seek greater levels of autonomy. And in policing, we have fairly high levels of autonomy. And in most evaluations of policing jobs from the perspective of this theory, show most people are satisfied with the level of autonomy in policing. Open feedback channels. Increase the feedback in some way about the quality and quantity of the work, and people will feel more satisfied because this will allow them to improve the quality of the work. Again, it can be technological, quality control through automated evaluation, so they get quick and immediate feedback about poor performance, or it can involve manual or purposeful evaluation. And this concept really flows from the era when we trained craftsmen, where the apprenticeship would be fairly lengthy, and the apprentice would receive typically a fairly immediate feedback from the craftsman or the master with whom he or she was apprenticing. And it contributes to obviously the feedback that we receive. Again, this chart, and you can look at it, and I recommend perhaps you print off a copy and perhaps revisit this lecture. But we can again we can work our way either way through this chart. We can look at the far right hand column there, which is what are good outcomes in terms of personal outcomes for the job and work outcomes. So we want motivation, we want performance, we want satisfaction, we want low absenteeism and turnover. The individuals want those, the organization want those. The higher the critical psychological states, the more we experience meaningfulness of work, responsibility for outcomes, and knowledge of the results. The higher that we will achieve those personal and work outcomes, as long as we have high growth needs strength. So a high growth needs strength person needs high levels of these core job dimensions in order to achieve these critical psychological states, whereas a person with low growth needs strength really wants fewer of those core job dimensions because that person doesn't want the critical psychological states or isn't as driven by them as a person with high growth needs strength. And of course, the person with low growth needs strength is probably not going to have much internal motivation. Quality of work performance is probably only going to be whatever's minimally acceptable in the organization. They achieve satisfaction typically from standardized, routinized jobs, and typically, while they may be there physically, they may not necessarily be there psychologically or committed to the organization. Finally, if we want to produce a job that is highly motivating, we have to design it so that it has all of these core job dimensions: skill variety, task identity, task significance, autonomy, and feedback. And the implementing concepts are ways in which we can increase those core job dimensions. So again, key factor here is match the individual to the job. If you have a job that has high levels of core job dimensions, You need a high growth need strength person for it. They'll be highly motivated. Stick a low growth need strength person in there, they'll be overwhelmed by the job. By the same token, if you have a job with low levels of core job dimensions, don't put a high growth need strength person there, or they will be demotivated. Save those jobs for your low growth need strength individuals.